welcome to the International Climate Webinar Series Industry Blitz, 10 minutes Q&A with the leaders from energy and climate sectors. I'm honored to speak with an energy veteran whose career beautifully illustrates the connection between African expertise and global platforms. With nearly 30 years dedicated to the energy landscape at ESCOM, his insights are deeply rooted in the continent. Yet, his contributions have also reached the highest international levels, serving on the board of the influential Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, during 2015, and leading the collaboration of the world's largest grid operator as president of Go15 during 2017. Welcome with me, Mr. Thava Govender. Thava, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Salima. Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Thava, let's start with a tricky question. Solar versus nuclear in futuristic energy Olympics. Can you imagine who wins and why?
In my view, I think there's no winner there. I think we need all the technologies. There's a place for every technology. So I think there's a place for solar and there's a place for nuclear. We definitely need both. So end of the day, they are mutually compatible. So no winner.
What essential actions must Africa take now for sustainable energy future?
So Salima, one of the things I've always said over the last 15, 20 years is that the big thing that needs to have in Africa is the forming a super grid. You need to connect the grid from Europe into North Africa and from North Africa right on to South Africa. South Africa has abundant installed energy capacity, and you've got a lot of capacity in Africa that is untapped, especially Congo, where you've got renewable, sustainable energy in terms of hydro. So that's one of the main things that needs to happen. You've got over 100,000, maybe 200,000 megawatts trapped in the Congo in terms of hydro. So I think that's the big issue. It's the will of the governments to get this to form a super grid and to give all the people in Africa, the world's largest growing population, access to energy.
Hopefully, we will have it in the future. What are the main opportunities and challenges for the Southern African power pool in managing the power grids?
So I think one of the big issues is that I think South Africa is getting stability in the electricity grid. Under obviously the new leadership, I think there's good signs that things are stabilizing and we will be able to get to full capacity that we have installed. I think once that happens, then we'll be able to get into a position where we'll be able to supply to our neighboring countries, but at the same time, able to actually take power from them as well on an obviously mutual beneficial basis. So I think that's the key issue. I always said before that it's about the grid, connecting the grid up and putting a stable grid in the Southern African area. That is not quite where it is. I think we need to build on that again. Once that is in place, you will see the South African power pool actually being very much, obviously far more stable. But those are one of the key issues that needs to happen first before you can form this super grid going into Central and into Northern Africa.
Absolutely. Let's go to a lighter note. What's the most memorable and funny debate you have heard on energy issues during your mini board meetings you had?
So one of the most interesting that I'll never forget is I was speaking in a panel I cannot remember where. It was somewhere either in South Africa or in Africa. And we were talking about developing the super grid and making sure that all the people in Africa that don't have access to energy actually have people that have never seen electricity in their house with their lights and their electric stoves. And someone mentioned, why should we be doing that? Because it's actually a waste of time, because these people have never had electricity. They'll never know what it is. So why should we actually develop to give it to them? They've never had it in their lifetime. Neither will their generations to come. So I found that very interesting. I thought that was a very short-sighted answer. And initially, it sounded very funny when the person said, but when you actually internalize it, it's not the right thing to say.
I agree with you that these comments have no place in the world we are in now, with all the challenges and all the needs in energy for our population, being in Africa or in another region of the world. Everyone has the right to have access to energy. Thank you. Now, let me ask you, how can Babcock engineering directly address Africa's crucial energy infrastructure needs for growth?
So one of the things we do as Babcock is that we help maintain any entity's plant basically that produces steam. So one of the things that we do is we actually refurbish a lot of the coal-fired power plants, either be in South Africa or other neighboring countries. So that may be interesting to say why you are still working on coal plants. Unfortunately, if you take a country like South Africa, coal is not going to disappear very quickly because we have abundant coal reserves in the country. We have a majority of the population involved in from a social point of view in these type of businesses. So if you decide to just shut down the coal business, you'll have a massive unemployment. So coal is here to stay, but it has to stay in a sustainable manner. So one of the things that you have to do is to obviously have clean coal technologies, which means you have to clean up all the emissions. And that's one thing that Babcock does. We work with the electric power sector where we actually reduce particulate emissions. We work with other sectors to reduce NOx emissions. We have technology partners that can reduce SOx. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of CO2 sequestration and capture, but I think the technology is helping us with that. So we're helping in other countries, not only in South Africa. We're working in quite a few of the Southern African countries. We're actually working in some of the middle. We're actually we got a project, hopefully get a project Middle East. We're also looking at power stations that we can help refurbish, plus also desalination power plants. Sorry, not desalination power, desalination plants, because that's obviously the issue that's going to be focused on. One is access to electricity, and the other issue is access to water. That's what we do. And also on the nuclear side, we have the capabilities via our parent company, Babcock International, to help any country that has got nuclear power stations in terms of maintenance, in terms of new build, in terms of any of the projects to make these plants safer.
Exactly, Colin, thank you. And linked to the question and talking about international collaboration, what is the most effective way for African utilities to collaborate internationally and enhance the energy security beyond the region?
So unfortunately, it goes down to political will. It's about countries cooperating. One is that they realize one country may have the necessary resources to produce electricity. Some may not, but that's why the grid comes in. You got to get the grid. You need to have a form of cooperation. I think every country wants to build power plants, whether it is on coal, whether it's nuclear, whether it's renewables. But it's not necessary to do that. You have countries that have got a surplus electricity production. They have potential. The countries that have the potential need to build those. I just think every country wants to use these power projects to build their economy. But people realize it's not only building electric power plants, but also the transmission infragrid will also help them to actually build their economies.
I will go back to your expertise in the African region. In your 30 years in African energy, what are the most significant changes or biggest hopes and worries for the future you see here?
So I think one of the big changes is we're seeing a lot of countries, developed countries, focusing on Africa, helping with their energy sector, helping them actually get diversity in their energy mix. Some countries are totally reliable on, for example, hydropower. When you have a drought, then the country has no other energy resources, and that's where you have the limited rotational load shedding. That's the terminology that's commonly used. So I think you're seeing more and more countries actually coming to help and assist. I think one of the biggest fears and the worries is that you have the stigma attached to Africa in terms of corruption. I think that's something that's keeping a lot of countries away. But if you can actually get to work and you can get proper governance in these type of projects, then it becomes feasible to actually do this work. I think some of the other worrying issues as well is a lot of companies are doing work in Africa, but the issue about getting ability to be actually remunerated for their work is a big concern. I've seen things change. I've seen where governments realize that they have to get other companies. They don't necessarily have the technology on their own, and they can get companies in. And yes, some of their very good projects in the pipeline. Actually, that's happened. That actually gives us hope that Africa, Africa can be lit up as much as the rest of the world. So I'm positive, but it goes back to what I repeated probably the fourth time I've said. It's about the will of governments to actually make it happen.
Thank you. Let's hope that in a near future, our leaders for working on policies and regulation will get to accelerate these changes. And in order to close our Q&A today, Let me ask you, if you have to give an obsolete energy solution technology retirement ceremony, what reason will you provide for its departure?
I would say coal has a role to play. I wouldn't say it's obsolete. I think that's something that's going to be the catalyst to drive more power generation, especially in some of the southern countries. I think that's something that we need to consider. Don't rule out coal. Everyone is obviously looking at renewables, but there's a place for everything. You need renewables, you need coal, you need nuclear, you need battery storage, especially in Africa, you need storage, energy storage. So I think it's a combination of things. It's just about how you do it, where you do it, and how you can actually make what we term clean coal technology.
Thank you for being with us, Thava Govender. Thank you for your insight. And I officially invite you to continue deeper the discussion on October 16 during our third discussion, African discussion on green transition and digital transformation for Africa. Until then, I wish you a good health and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Salima.